A new love deception. A young man deceives a lonely grandmother with charm and attention, pretending to offer true love. Gradually, he gains her trust and begins to take possession of the inheritance left by her deceased husband. But what seemed like a perfect con hides a fatal error he never anticipated. His plan ends in national shock. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The house at 38 Maple Street had always been known by neighbors as a welcoming home. On Sunday afternoons, the aroma of cornbread escaped through the windows, while Frank Sinatra songs accompanied casual conversations. It was there that Ellen, 62, and Anthony, 67, had built 4 decades of life together. That April morning, however, silence dominated every room. Ellen stared at the coffee cup on the kitchen table, while reality imposed itself like an unwanted visitor. After a stroke that left him partially debilitated, Anthony had decided to accept their daughter's invitation to temporarily live in England, where he would receive specialized treatments unavailable in the United States. "Mrs. Ellen, are you sure you'll be all right alone?" asked Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper who came twice a week while organizing some pots. "I'll adapt, Wilson. What else can I do?" she replied, with a fragile smile that barely disguised her helplessness. In the master bedroom, the empty side of the king-size bed seemed larger than it really was. Anthony's shirt still occupied half the closet, and his cologne permeated the pillows. On the desk, a blue folder contained documents, passwords, and detailed instructions he had prepared before leaving. "Everything's here, Ellen. Any questions, just call me. The bank manager has been notified that you'll be taking over the accounts," he had said before boarding. But now, faced with the complexity of statements, investments, and access codes, Ellen felt like a foreigner in an unknown country. For decades, Anthony had handled the finances while she managed the home and her small craft store, now run by her niece. Sitting in the living room armchair, Ellen opened the phone directory. Their children, Luke and Maria, called daily, but they were distant. One in England with his father, the other in New York, absorbed in her legal career. Her cell phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Mom, have you managed to access the joint account yet?" "Dad's worried." It was Maria, always practical and objective. "Not yet, honey. I think I'll need to go to the bank in person." "But Mom, nowadays everything can be done through the app. Did you install it like I taught you?" Ellen sighed, feeling the weight of incomprehension. "I installed it, Maria, but there's an error message I don't understand." "Okay, I'll call you later to try to solve this. I have a hearing now. Love you." The call ended before Ellen could respond. Through the window, she observed Martha, the middle-aged neighbor who had recently moved to the house next door, watering her orchids. Unlike Ellen, Martha was independent, drove her own car, traveled alone, and seemed to navigate the digital world with ease. The next morning, Ellen woke up determined. She wore her navy blue outfit, saved for special occasions, carefully combed her gray hair, and took a taxi to the bank branch downtown. The priority line moved slowly. When it was finally her turn, she found herself facing a young man of approximately 30 years, attentive brown eyes, and a warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Ryan Miller at your service. How may I help you?" There was something comforting in the way he looked at her, unhurried, without the condescension usually reserved for the elderly. Ellen explained her situation, and he listened attentively, taking notes. "Don't worry, we'll solve all this together," he said, offering a smile that for the first time in weeks made Ellen feel she wasn't completely alone in this world that seemed increasingly strange and fast-paced. During the following 3 weeks, Ellen's visits to the bank became more frequent. Each time Ryan received her with exclusive attention, patiently guiding her through the bureaucratic labyrinths that previously seemed insurmountable. "You're becoming an internet banking expert," he joked, as Ellen finally managed to make a transfer through the app. "Only because I have a very patient teacher," she replied, feeling her face blush slightly. Leaving the bank that afternoon, Ellen was surprised by the torrential rain falling. Standing under the marquee, she contemplated the dark sky when Ryan appeared by her side. "Mrs. Ellen, what a coincidence, I'm leaving too. May I drive you home?" His car was simple but impeccably clean. During the journey, Ryan asked about her life, showing genuine interest in her stories. Ellen told him about the craft, Store, her distant children, the decades dedicated to her family. "And now alone I'm learning to reinvent myself," she concluded with a sigh. "You're an admirable woman," he said, parking in front of her house. "Many people your age would settle, but you're facing new challenges." Those words touched Ellen deeply. How long had it been since she received a sincere compliment? Anthony, always busy with work, rarely expressed admiration, although she knew he loved her. The following week, when retrieving some documents at the bank, Ellen found a small flower arrangement on Ryan's desk. "A reminder of how life can bloom at any age," he said, handing her the gift. Martha, the observant neighbor, noticed the subtle changes in Ellen, her hair now always neat, clothes chosen more carefully, the discreet lipstick she had started wearing again. "Neighbor, care for some coffee?" "I made carrot cake," Martha invited on a Saturday afternoon. On the airy porch of the house next door, between porcelain cups and light conversations, an unexpected friendship was born. Martha, divorced for 5 years, understood the loneliness Ellen faced. "When my marriage ended, I felt like I'd lost my compass," Martha confessed. "But I learned we can draw new maps for our lives." Ellen hesitated, but ended up sharing her impressions about Ryan. "It's silly, I know. Such a young man being so attentive to me." "Why would it be silly?" questioned Martha. "Sincere attention is a rare gift, regardless of who offers it." That night, Ellen received a message on her cell phone. It was Ryan, asking if she had managed to access the new investment system. The conversation, initiated about banking matters, extended to various topics. He told her about his passion for American literature, especially Joan Didion, coincidentally Ellen's favorite author. Days later, when leaving the bank, Ryan invited her for coffee. "I know a bookstore nearby with a cozy space. We could talk about Didion if you have time." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Ryan listened fascinated as Ellen shared interpretations about the year of magical thinking. There was an unexpected connection between them, as if the age difference disappeared before the power of words. "You make me feel intelligent again," Ellen confessed. "Sometimes, with age, people start treating you as if your opinions were less relevant." "Then people are foolish," he replied, his eyes fixed on hers. "I could listen to you talk for hours." At home, in front of the mirror, Ellen examined her reflection with renewed eyes, the wrinkles around her eyes, the marks of time that had bothered her before, now seemed to tell stories of a life rich in experiences. For the first time in months, she felt truly alive. In the weekly video call with Anthony, she was different. She spoke animatedly about her new digital discoveries, omitting, however, the source of her learning. "You look well, Ellen," he observed, surprised. "I'm adapting, Anthony. Life goes on, doesn't it?" The next morning, when opening the door to collect the newspaper, Ellen found a package. Inside was a rare copy of Play It As It Lays with a dedication, "For Ellen, who teaches me that true youth lies in curiosity about life. Ryan." May arrived with warmer days and a jasmine scent that invaded Ellen's garden. Conversations with Ryan, previously restricted to banking matters, expanded to nightly phone calls and constant messages. He shared poems, she responded with reflections. A silent complicity grew between them. On a Sunday afternoon, while Ellen watered the plants, she heard the doorbell. It was Ryan, holding a picnic basket. "I hope I'm not being inconvenient," he said, with a hesitant smile. "I thought maybe you'd like to enjoy the day at the municipal park. They say the orchestra plays classical music on Sundays." The park was full of families and couples. Ryan spread a blanket under a leafy tree and meticulously organized the items. He had brought cheeses, fruits, artisanal breads, and a bottle of red wine. "How did you know I like red wine?" asked Ellen, surprised. "You mentioned it in one of our conversations about literature. You said you enjoy a glass while reading." Didion on Friday nights. That attention to detail touched Ellen deeply. Anthony, even after decades together, rarely remembered her preferences. The orchestra began playing Vivaldi. The melodious notes of spring seemed to perfectly accompany that moment. "Dance with me?" invited Ryan, extending his hand. "Here? In front of everyone?" Ellen hesitated, suddenly feeling conscious of every wrinkle on her face. "Yes, here. Where everyone can see how music comes alive when you move." Overcoming her initial fear, Ellen accepted. Her steps, first timid, gained confidence under Ryan's gentle guidance. Some people watched, some smiled. An elderly couple nearby discreetly applauded. "See, nobody's judging," he whispered. "They just see two people enjoying the music." When they returned home at dusk, Ryan accompanied her to the door. "Thank you for the wonderful day," said Ellen, feeling an almost adolescent emotion. "The pleasure was mine," he replied, leaning in to softly kiss her cheek. The touch of his lips on her skin left Ellen in a state of suspension, as if time had momentarily paused. Ryan smiled, wished her good night and left, leaving her with thoughts swirling. The next morning, during coffee with Martha, Ellen couldn't contain her enthusiastic narrative about the picnic. "He's so attentive, Martha. He remembers details I wouldn't even recall mentioning." Her friend listened attentively, her face revealing a mixture of joy and concern. "I'm happy to see you like this, Radiant. Just be careful with expectations, Ellen. The age difference—" I know," interrupted Ellen. "I'm not fantasizing about a romance, just enjoying the company and attention. It's as if I felt seen again." That afternoon, when checking her accounts in the app, Ellen noticed an unrecognized transfer. Worried, she immediately called Ryan. "Don't worry, we'll solve this," he assured. "May I stop by your house after work to check together?" When he arrived, he brought not only technical solutions, but also a complete dinner: shrimp risotto, the specialty of an Italian restaurant Ellen had mentioned she enjoyed. After solving the banking issue, a system error according to Ryan, they dined on the porch under the starry sky. "Tell me about your dreams, Ellen," he asked, serving more wine. "Those you've kept to yourself all these years." No one had ever asked that before. The words flowed like a long-dammed river. Ellen spoke about her desire to see Venice, to resume the painting she had abandoned in her youth, to write a memoir. "Why not fulfill them now?" questioned Ryan, his eyes shining under the candlelight he had lit himself. "It's never too late." "Maybe I need an incentive," she replied, feeling her heart race when he held her hand across the table. "Maybe I can be that incentive." When the phone rang, breaking the enchantment of the moment, Ellen almost ignored it. It was Maria, her daughter. "Mom, is everything okay? I tried calling earlier." "Yes, dear, I'm just busy." "Busy?" Maria's tone was surprised. "With what?" "Having dinner with a friend," replied Ellen, feeling strangely guilty. "A friend? What friend?" "We'll talk later, Maria. Enjoy your night." Upon hanging up, she found Ryan's curious gaze. "Your daughter seems surprised you have a social life," he commented, with an understanding smile. "They see me frozen in the role of mother and wife. Anything beyond that seems incomprehensible." Ryan moved closer, sitting beside her on the sofa. "I see much more, Ellen. I see a fascinating woman who deserves to live intensely." When he leaned in, his lips met hers in a soft, almost reverent kiss. Ellen felt her body tremble, divided between the desire awakening and the voice of reason whispering warnings. The following weeks flowed in an almost dreamlike atmosphere for Ellen. Ryan became a constant presence in her home. Dinners, old, movies on television, conversations that crossed into the early morning. The growing intimacy between them made time seem elastic, stretching moments of pleasure and compressing the external reality. One June morning, while preparing coffee, Helen received a call from Anthony. "The doctor has approved longer video calls," he announced, excited. "We can talk better now." During the call, Anthony noticed changes in the environment. "Are those new orchids and that painting on the wall?" "Yes, I decided to bring more color into the house," replied Ellen, omitting that the flowers were a gift from Ryan and that the painting had been purchased during an outing with him to a craft fair. "You look different, Ellen. More youthful." There was an implicit question in that observation that Ellen preferred to ignore. "I'm adapting, Anthony. Discovering new interests." After hanging up, she felt a weight in her chest. The complicity of 4 decades with Anthony now contrasted with this new secret she kept. It wasn't exactly infidelity, she told herself. After all, Anthony was distant, and she was simply seeking companionship. But the justification sounded fragile, even to her own ears. That afternoon, Ryan appeared unexpectedly, bringing a travel catalogue. "I've been thinking about your dreams," he said, opening the material on the table. "Venice in September is magnificent. Fewer tourists, perfect weather." Ellen looked at the images of Venetian canals and romantic gondolas with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "Ryan, this is crazy. I can't just—" "Why not?" he interrupted, holding her hands. "What's stopping you from living your dreams now?" The intensity in his eyes was hypnotic. Ellen felt simultaneously flattered and uncomfortable with that insistence. "We need to talk about money," he continued. "I saw that you have some stagnant investments that could yield much more." "What do you mean?" questioned Ellen, furrowing her brow. "Your profile at the bank shows overly conservative investments. I could guide you toward better options." Something about the practicality with which he approached her finances left Ellen uneasy. Ryan noticed her hesitation and quickly changed the subject, suggesting dinner out to celebrate the 2 months since they'd met. At the restaurant, one of the most elegant in the city, Ryan seemed to know all the waiters. He ordered expensive wines and sophisticated dishes with the naturalness of someone who frequently visited that environment. "How do you maintain this standard of living on a banker's salary?" asked Ellen, curious. "I make good investments," he replied with an enigmatic smile, "and I have some side businesses." On the way back, they passed a jewelry store. Ryan stopped, observing a pearl necklace in the window. "It would look perfect." "On you," he commented, pulling her inside the store before she could protest. The salesman, an elderly gentleman, greeted Ryan with familiarity. "Mr. Miller, what a pleasure to see you again. Was the last piece you took well appreciated?" Ryan seemed momentarily disconcerted. "Yes, of course. Now I'd like to see that pearl necklace from the window." While trying on the necklace, Ellen noticed in the mirror a young woman who entered the store. Upon seeing Ryan, the young woman showed clear surprise, quickly disguised when he noticed her. The look they exchanged was brief, but loaded with meanings Ellen couldn't decipher. As they left the jewelry store, Ellen wore the new necklace, a gift she accepted after much insistence from Ryan. In the taxi, she questioned him. "Who was that young woman in the store? She seemed to know you." "What woman?" he replied, with apparent confusion. "I didn't notice anyone in particular." The denial sounded false to Ellen's ears, but she didn't insist. That night, however, other details began to emerge in her memory. The luxury watch he occasionally wore, the familiarity with expensive restaurants, the calls he answered moving away to speak privately. The next morning, Martha appeared for the usual coffee, finding Ellen thoughtful. "What happened?" she asked, noticing her friend's dark circles. Ellen shared her concerns, from the conversation about investments to the strange encounter at the jewelry store. Martha listened attentively, her face gradually assuming a serious expression. "Ellen, I don't want to be alarmist, but have you checked your accounts recently? That unrecognized transfer last month, are you sure it was a system error?" Ryan confirmed it was. He solved the issue himself. And who verified if the solution was correct? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Ellen felt a chill run down her spine. "Let's check now," suggested Martha firmly. On the computer, when accessing the detailed statement of accounts, Ellen turned pale. There were small periodic transfers to an unknown account, always in amounts that could go unnoticed. $450, $380, $500. "There must be some mistake," murmured Ellen, hands trembling over the keyboard. "Call the bank," insisted Martha. "But don't talk to Ryan." The call confirmed the worst. The transfers were authorized through the app, using Ellen's password. Always at times that coincided with her visits to the bank or moments when Ryan was at her house. The initial shock gave way to deep pain. Ellen, sitting in her living room with Martha, felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. The small transfers, although not significantly compromising her savings, revealed a calculated betrayal that shattered every moment of apparent sincerity experienced with Ryan. "How could I be so naive?" she murmured, tears silently streaming. Don't blame yourself," consoled Martha, holding her hands. "He's a skilled manipulator. He carefully constructed every detail to gain your trust." Ellen's phone vibrated with a message from Ryan. "Thinking of you. Dinner tonight." "What do I do now?" she asked, showing the message to Martha. "We need more information before confronting him," replied her friend thoughtfully. "I have a nephew who works with digital security. He can help us better understand what's happening." Edward, Martha's nephew, was a young man with glasses and quick speech who arrived in the late afternoon. With impressive skill, he analyzed Ellen's cell phone and computer. "There's a mirror app installed on your phone, Mrs. Ellen," he explained. "Everything you do in online banking is automatically visible to whoever has access to the other device. And there's a keylogger on your computer that records everything you type." "In English, please," asked Martha impatiently. "He can see all her passwords, all transactions in real time, and he probably installed this while teaching her to use the online systems." Ellen recalled the many times Ryan had taken her phone to configure something or used her computer to demonstrate a procedure. Each memory now had a bitter taste. "Let's remove all this," continued Edward, "and change all your passwords, but I suggest you don't show that you've discovered anything yet." "You want me to keep pretending?" asked Ellen, horrified. "Just until we fully understand the scheme," intervened Martha. "We need to know if he's done this to other people, if he works alone." Reluctantly, Ellen agreed. She responded to Ryan's message normally, postponing dinner to the next day with the excuse of a headache. Edward, before leaving, left a small recording device with Ellen. "For your protection, Mrs. Ellen, and as evidence if necessary." That night, unable to sleep, Ellen searched through her social media. She found Ryan in a recent photo with the same young woman from the jewelry store. The caption simply read, "Special night with my love." The date coincided with a day when he claimed to be visiting his sick mother in another city. With trembling hands, Ellen continued investigating. The young woman's profile, Caitlin, showed several photos of the couple on trips, at luxury restaurants and social events. In one of them, Caitlin proudly displayed an engagement ring. The discovery was devastating. It wasn't just about money. Ryan was leading a double life, building parallel narratives of affection and intimacy. The next morning, Martha arrived accompanied by an unknown lady. "This is Rebecca, my former work colleague," she introduced. "I think you two have something in common." Rebecca, an elegant 70-year-old woman, sat with rigid posture, hands nervously interlaced in her lap. "I know Ryan," she said without preamble. "Or rather, I knew a Ryan. In my case, he introduced himself as Richard, a financial consultant. The approach was identical: attention, care, interest in my tastes, gifts." Ellen listened in a state of torpor, each of Rebecca's words confirming her worst nightmare. "He convinced me to make investments in exclusive funds that promised exceptional returns. I transferred almost half of my savings before realizing I was being deceived." "How did you find out?" asked Ellen in a thread of voice. "In the worst possible way. I accidentally found him in a restaurant with another lady, in a clearly romantic situation. When I confronted him, he denied knowing me, pretended confusion. The humiliation was..." Rebecca didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Ellen could perfectly imagine the scene, the cruel discard after the financial utility was exhausted. "Did you file a police report?" asked Martha. "Yes, but he disappeared, changed numbers, addresses. The police said it was a common case of emotional fraud, almost impossible to fully track. Apparently, he operates in different cities with different identities." Edward returned in the afternoon with more disturbing discoveries. Cross-referencing information, he found at least 3 other similar cases in neighboring cities over the past 2 years. "Always the same pattern," he explained. "Mature women, widows or temporarily alone with good financial situations. He establishes an emotional bond, gains access to accounts, and begins with small transfers that gradually increase." "And Caitlin?" questioned Ellen. The young woman in the photos. From what I could gather, she seems to be his accomplice. They forge a public relationship on social media, but they're actually partners in the scam. She probably helps identify potential targets, monitors movements, provides an alibi when necessary. The doorbell rang, interrupting the conversation. It was a delivery. Red roses with a handwritten card from Ryan. Counting the hours until tonight, I have a special surprise for you. Ellen stared at the flowers, feeling a toxic mixture of anger and disappointment. Still want to postpone the confrontation? She asked Martha, with renewed determination in her voice. No, replied her friend, equally resolute. It's time for him to meet the real Ellen. The plan was meticulously elaborated throughout the afternoon. Edward installed discrete cameras in the living room and kitchen, connected to a real-time recording system. Rebecca contributed with her painful experience, pointing out manipulation tactics Ryan would likely use when confronted. He'll deny everything initially, she explained. Then he'll try to reverse the situation, making you feel guilty for distrusting him. If that doesn't work, he'll appeal to sentimentality. Martha brought another vital perspective. We need concrete evidence, not just for you, Ellen, but to protect other women he might be deceiving simultaneously. At 7 p.m. everything was ready. Martha and Edward would remain in the house next door, monitoring the cameras. Rebecca would wait in the guest room in case her presence was needed. Ellen, dressed with deliberate elegance, waited in the living room with apparent tranquility, although her heart beat erratically. The doorbell rang punctually at 8 p.m. Ryan was impeccable in a navy blue suit, holding a bottle of champagne and a small velvet box. You look stunning, he complimented, kissing her softly. Special occasion? Asked Ellen, indicating the champagne. The most special, he replied with a mysterious smile. I prepared something that will change our lives. In the kitchen, while Ellen pretended to fetch glasses, she took a deep breath to contain the nausea that invaded her. The falseness of that man was so absolute that each word now sounded like an offense. Back in the living room, she found Ryan discreetly checking his cell phone. Checking how my investments are doing, she asked, with studied calmness. He quickly put away the device, smiling. Just cancelling a work call, tonight is all yours. Corrected Ellen, sitting down. Our night, our investments, our future, right? Something in her tone must have alerted Ryan, who observed her with greater attention. Exactly, he agreed, cautious. In fact, I wanted to talk precisely about our future. He opened the champagne with a precise movement, serving the 2 glasses. A toast, he proposed, to new beginnings. Before the toast, interrupted Ellen, could you explain something? I noticed some strange transfers in my account, small amounts, but frequent. Ryan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before regaining composure. Probably. Automatic bank fees, I can check that for you tomorrow. I already checked, replied Ellen, maintaining his gaze. They're transfers to an account in the name of Caitlin Roberts. Do you know her? The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. Ryan slowly set down his glass, his eyes now cold and calculating. I don't know what you're talking about, Ellen. Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking, she replied, keeping her voice firm. Just as I'm asking about the Mirror app on my phone, the keylogger on my computer, and about your fiancé on social media. Ryan abruptly stood up, his face a mask of indignation. This is absurd. Who put these ideas in your head, that nosy neighbor of yours, and so you're denying it? Of course I am, he exclaimed, running his hands through his hair in a rehearsed gesture of frustration. I thought we had something special, Ellen. Trust, mutual respect, and now you receive me with unfounded accusations. The transformation was astonishing. The sweet and attentive man had completely disappeared, replaced by this skilled actor, who now played the role of unjustly victimized. Maybe I should leave, he continued, moving toward the door. When you're thinking more clearly, we can talk. Before you go, said Ellen, taking her own cell phone, I'd like to show you something. She opened the gallery app, displaying photos that Edward had recovered, Ryan and Caitlin together in various settings, including recent images. Curious, isn't it? While you said you were visiting your sick mother, you were actually with your partner, fiancé, Accomplice? What's the correct term, Ryan? His face hardened. The mask of indignation gave way to calculating coldness. What exactly do you want, Ellen? Money, is that it? How much? It was the confirmation she didn't need, but which still hit her like a physical blow. Even confronted with evidence, he showed no remorse, only cold pragmatism. I want the truth, she replied. I want to understand how you sleep at night. He laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. The truth? The truth is that you were begging for attention. A lonely, needy woman, practically abandoned by her husband. It was so easy, it was almost no fun. The words were calculated to hurt, and they succeeded. Ellen felt the impact of each syllable, but remained firm. And the others? Rebecca, Cecilia, Marcy? Were they easy too? The mention of other names caused visible discomfort in Ryan. He quickly looked at the exits, like a cornered animal assessing escape routes. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, replied Ellen, standing up. Just as you know that every word of this conversation is being recorded. Ryan's countenance transformed again, changing from arrogance to cold calculation. That's illegal. Recording without consent has no legal value. Perhaps not in court, agreed Ellen, but it will certainly have value for your other current targets and for the bank where you work. Ryan's face transformed into a mask of cold calculation. His eyes, once warm, now examined Ellen as one evaluating an unexpected opponent. It seems I underestimated you, he said, visibly relaxing. You're smarter than you appear. He sat down again, now with a completely different posture. Legs crossed, elbows comfortably supported, as if he were in control of the situation. And now? What's the next step in this little theater of yours? Ellen remained firm, though she felt her legs trembling. I want to know everything. How the scheme works, who else is involved, how much money you've already taken from women like me. Ryan smiled, a gesture that now seemed predatory. Why would I tell you? Because we already have enough evidence to expose you, replied Ellen. The question is just how deep this goes. As if waiting for the right moment, the guest room door opened. Rebecca entered the living room, her gaze fixed on Ryan. Hello, Richard, she said, using the name by which she had known him. Or do. You prefer Ryan now? The surprise was genuine. Ryan visibly paled upon recognizing Rebecca. You set up an ambush, he murmured, now clearly uncomfortable. We prefer to call it an intervention, replied Martha, entering through the front door. With Edward. Ryan looked at the multiple exits, assessing his chances. Edward, noticing, strategically positioned himself near the main door. It's over, Ryan, said Ellen, with a calmness that surprised herself. We have the documented transfers, the spyware you installed, testimonies from other victims. The only question now is, will you voluntarily tell us how everything works, or do we let the authorities extract that information? Cornered, Ryan did what manipulators always do when they lose control, tried to regain it. Ellen, we need to talk alone, he asked, his voice suddenly soft. What we had was real, despite everything. I really care about you. Rebecca laughed, bitterly. Same words, same tone. It's almost like hearing a recording. Don't waste your time, added Martha. Ellen is no longer under your spell. Realizing the futility of emotional manipulation, Ryan changed strategy. What do you want? Money. I can return what I took from Ellen. It wasn't that much. We want the truth, insisted Ellen, how the complete scheme works. Something in the determined look of the three women must have convinced Ryan there was no easy way out. He sighed, running his hands over his face in an apparent gesture of surrender. It's a simple system, he began with clinical detachment. We identify middle-aged or elderly women with good financial situations, preferably alone or emotionally vulnerable. Access to banking data facilitates selection. Who are we? Questioned Edward, noting every word. Me and Caitlin mainly. Sometimes other temporary associates. Each has their specialty. I am the, let's say, relationship specialist. The seducer, corrected Rebecca with contempt. I prefer builder of emotional connection, he replied with a cynical smile. It's really a job. It requires research, preparation, constant adaptation. Each woman requires a specific approach. Ellen felt nauseous thinking about how she had been studied, how each interaction had been planned to exploit her specific vulnerabilities. "How did you choose me?" she asked, needing to understand. "You walked into the bank looking completely lost. You mentioned that your husband had always taken care of finances and was now away. We checked your account, saw the substantial investments, the fully paid house, a perfect profile." The coldness with which he described the process was more disturbing than any aggressiveness. "And Caitlin?" insisted Ellen. "What exactly is her role?" "Multiple. She researches backgrounds, monitors social media to understand tastes and vulnerabilities, sometimes acts as bait or distraction. In your case, she identified your interest in literature, especially Joan Didion, through old comments in Facebook literary groups. Each revelation was like a small blade, exposing the extent of the manipulation. It hadn't been a coincidence. Therefore, the shared interest in Didion, the quotes that seemed so spontaneous, the literary gift so meaningful. "And the money?" asked Martha. "Where does it go?" "Different accounts, usually abroad. Frequent small transfers are less suspicious than large movements. We start with minimal values, testing the victim's attention. If it goes unnoticed, we gradually increase." "How much did you intend to take from me?" questioned Ellen. Ryan studied her with clinical curiosity. "Honestly, you had the potential to be our biggest success. Recent widow, emotionally vulnerable, financially stable, distant children, no close friends until recently. The plan was the gradual transfer of most of your investments, possibly even selling the house eventually." The mention of widowhood momentarily confused Ellen, until she realized he had probably assumed that Anthony had died, not just traveled for treatment. An error in his meticulous research. "My husband is alive," she corrected, "just temporarily abroad." Ryan seemed genuinely surprised. "Interesting. Caitlin must have misinterpreted some information. That would have eventually complicated our plans." The doorbell rang, interrupting the confession. Edward opened the door, making way for a serious-looking man in formal attire. "Dr. Paul Carter, attorney," he introduced himself, entering the living room and observing the scene with professional interest. "Have I arrived at the appropriate moment?" "Perfect," replied Martha. "Ryan was just telling us how his manipulation and fraud scheme works." The newcomer placed his briefcase on the table, extracting his own recorder and some documents. "Excellent. We can formalize this right now." 3 months had passed since that revealing night. Autumn arrived with gentle winds that swayed the new curtains in Ellen's living room. The house, previously marked by memories of manipulation, had been transformed. Walls repainted in light tones, furniture rearranged, spaces opened where the confinement of routine once reigned. Ellen observed the garden through the window while waiting for her visitors. The roses Ryan had brought had been removed the day after the confrontation. In their place now grew sunflowers planted by herself, symbols of resistance that stubbornly follow the sun. The doorbell rang. Martha entered first, followed by Rebecca and 2 other women Ellen had recently met. Cecilia and Marcy, also Ryan's victims. "I brought the new brochures," announced Martha, showing the colorful material. "Recognize the signs. Protecting yourself." From Emotional Fraud was the title of the guide they had created together. The 5 women gathered in the enlarged living room, now adapted for small events. The central table was covered with informational materials, books about financial autonomy and emotional independence. 15 more participants have confirmed for tomorrow's workshop, informed Cecilia, consulting her tablet. After the revelation of Ryan's scheme, something unexpected had happened. Instead of retreating in shame or self-deprecation, the victims united. What began as a mutual support group gradually transformed into a structured initiative for prevention and awareness. Attorney. Dr. Paul, impressed with the determination of those women, offered pro bono legal support. With his guidance, they filed formal complaints against Ryan and Caitlin, who now faced charges in different jurisdictions. I received an important notification today, commented Rebecca, removing an envelope from her purse. The bank dismissed Ryan for just cause and is cooperating with the investigations. Apparently, other employees may be involved in similar schemes. The news was received with contained satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge, but justice and mainly prevention, so that other people wouldn't go through the same trauma. Ellen's phone rang. It was a video call from Anthony. "Start the workshop without me," she told her friends, heading to the office. "I'll be back in a few minutes." On the screen, Anthony's face looked more flushed, healthy. The treatment in England was showing positive results. "How are things?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Busy, actually," replied Ellen with a genuine smile. "We're expanding the project to other cities." After the confrontation with Ryan, Ellen had made a difficult decision to tell Anthony the whole truth. The initial conversation had been painful, marked by shock, incomprehension, and, inevitably, hurt. But with time, honesty paved the way for a deeper dialogue about their 40 years of marriage, the unspoken expectations, the roles they had assumed without questioning. "The doctor said I can return next month," informed Anthony. "If you still want me to." The hesitation in his voice revealed a new vulnerability in their relationship. The crisis had involuntarily exposed fractures they had both ignored for decades. "I do," replied Ellen, "but we'll return different." "Anthony, I've changed." "So have I," he admitted, "and maybe that's good for us." Ending the call with promises to talk again at night, Ellen returned to the living room where her friends were organizing materials for the workshop. "Everything okay?" asked Martha, noticing her teary eyes. "Better than I expected," confirmed Ellen. "Anthony returns next month." "And how do you feel about that?" questioned Rebecca. "Ready for a fresh start," she replied with conviction. "An honest, fresh start." The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to preparations for the workshop. The group had developed its own methodology. First, they shared their personal experiences, demystifying the shame associated with manipulation. Then, they presented warning signs and behavioral patterns of scammers. Finally, they offered practical tools for financial and emotional protection. At the end of the day, when her friends said goodbye, Ellen remained on the porch, observing the twilight. Thinking about Ryan still provoked a visceral discomfort, but it no longer paralyzed her. She had transformed that traumatic experience into purpose, that shame into strength. The phone rang again. It was Maria, her daughter. "Mom, I just saw the project website. It's amazing. Why didn't you tell me you were expanding so much?" Ellen smiled. The relationship with her children had also transformed. The trauma, shared with honesty, had opened space for a deeper and less hierarchical understanding. "We were finalizing some details," she explained. "Actually, I'd like you to participate in the legal panel next month if you can." "Of course. I can. I'm already reorganizing my schedule." After hanging up, Ellen headed to the former sewing room, now converted into a studio. The easel supported a canvas in process, a vibrant self-portrait with decisive brushstrokes, where her face gradually emerged between shadows and lights. She had resumed painting, a passion abandoned in her youth. In the corner of the studio, a half-packed suitcase contained light clothes and a Venice guide. On the small table beside it, plane tickets for her and Anthony, dated 2 months later. They would go together, not as before, she following, he leading, but as rediscovered partners, each bringing their own vision to the shared journey. On the opposite wall, a framed picture displayed the phrase that now served as a personal motto extracted from Joan Didion, the author Ryan had used as a manipulation tool, but whom Ellen had reclaimed for herself. "I think we are well advised to keep on nodding terms with the people we used to be, whether we find them attractive, company or not." Some terms, however, she had already found: self-determination, restart, rebirth, and most importantly, authenticity, that which Ryan had tried to steal with his falseness, but which, paradoxically, had helped awaken with greater strength. Looking at the starry sky through the studio window, Ellen felt a serenity that came not from the absence of pain, for the scars remained, but from the awareness of her own strength. The vulnerability that Ryan had identified as weakness had become rechanneled her greatest power. Tomorrow would be a new day of work on the project. More women would arrive, some still carrying the weight of shame, others already on the path to reconstruction. And Ellen would be there to receive them, not as a victim but as a survivor, not as an example of fragility, but as a testimony of resilience. On her wrist, the watch marked new times. Each second now fully belonged